All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Obviously, Cowboys kicked off their preseason last night, Saturday evening, with a look. We all can look at it and say, honest, it was a dispiriting 31-21 defeat. It is the preseason. No one of any significance played for the Dallas Cowboys in terms of starters, in terms of the stars. Same thing with the Rams. It was a lot of battles of half second string, a lot of third, fourth, fifth stringers, but a lot of things to be concerned about, but there are things to be positive about as well. Let's jump into, like we always do on this channel, with our sort of stat of the day. This was very interesting. This is courtesy of Todd Archer, Cowboys beat reporter primarily for ESPN these days. He posted on X, Cowboys opened the preseason with a 31-21 loss to the Rams. They have lost 7 straight preseason openers now. So that's kind of an interesting statistic. It tells you the validity of performance in the preseason, right? So if you go back to 7 games, 7 straight preseasons, we're going 2019 to 2025 now. So we're looking at Jason Garrett's final year with the Dallas Cowboys as a head coach, 5 years of Mike McCarthy, and now we've got the first year of Schottenheimer. So we have the whole gambit of performances there. We've got the 2019, we've got Garrett's 8-8. That was a total disappointment. Well, I guess 2020 they canceled the preseason, so we got to go back to 2018. Excuse me, we skipped 2020, 2018, 2019. We've got 1 playoff win, a division title. We've got Garrett 8-8 disappointment. We've got 3 straight 12-win seasons, 21 through 23 under McCarthy. Last year's disappointing 10-loss season, and whatever this year ends up being. So first preseason game performance, does it have any indication of success one way or the other? Absolutely not. So like I tell everyone all the time in the preseason, I told you guys too, is that don't look at team performance, don't look at position group performances necessarily, look at individual performances. Now the Cowboys had a lot of very poor individual performances. They had some really good ones, which we'll get to in just a second. But I want to throw up one of the things I thought was really cool, and this is what makes the preseason so great. So this was a post from Trayshawn Holton, who we'll get to more later with the Dallas Cowboys. He was reposting and added a little comment there about a highlight that the Cowboys posted on social media of his big catch towards the end of the game. He said, "Grandma, look at your grandson," with that emoji there. You can see it on the screen there. I think one of the things that's so cool about the preseason is that you have these guys, these late round rookies and undrafted free agents. And Holden, I think, is a good player. And there's a lot of good players there, I think, that are late round undrafted guys for Dallas that should make this team, or at least be a practice squad guy. But this is sort of the dream, right? You're making a catch for the Dallas Cowboys. You're playing NFL football, right? This is unbelievable stuff that a lot of these guys experience. And I think that's one of the things we have to take a grain of salt with some of these rookies and young guys, is that this is their first chance playing NFL football. Like, this is what they've dreamed about since they were 6 years old. There's going to be some craziness. That's why the preseason gets really, really wacky, of course. And that's why teams that have veteran coaching staff and veteran players, Bennett's been there before. For example, the quarterback who played primarily for the Rams. He's played for the Rams a few years before. Why did he look so comfortable at times? Because he's been in this kind of environment. Last year with the Rams, does anyone remember what he did in this very similar situation against Dallas? Threw 4 picks. He was a disaster, right? Again, only scored, I think, 13 points. Played, I think, pretty much the entire game, if I remember correctly. Again, if you're not familiar with preseason football, especially for these young guys, it's chaotic, it's wild, especially the first game. Let's not overreact when we look at team performance. Again, a lot of things to be concerned about, but let's get into the individual performances, because that's what really matters. Let's go into the box score to look at passing and rushing for the Dallas Cowboys, just to kind of give a high-level view and kind of talk through some of it. Joe Milton, for anyone who didn't watch the game, was quite poor, to be totally honest. He was horrifically inaccurate. I mean, he showcased a lot of his arm talent. There's no doubt about that. But missed, I think, Flournoy, he missed them at one for some incredibly open deep crosser. It was a perfect play design. It's a very standard concept. It wasn't anything super elaborate, but it's just a play action where the receiver on the right side works all the way across the field on a deep crossing route. The receiver on the left side runs a clear out of a deep post. So you run a play action to bring everybody up. You bootleg around the clear out with the deep side on the left, and it's wide open for a huge play, right? Perfectly executed, good pass protection, and Milton misses him by like forever. Throws him like 20 yards over his head. Just a total catastrophic miss, right? Can't happen, right? He missed a bunch of other receivers, right? Through the interception. This is just a guy who, frankly, struggled and looked really kind of like a guy that was overexcited, a little over his skis. Calmed down a little bit at the end of the game. It was just sort of a contrast to Stetson Bennett. Very similar, by the way, to Bennett's performance last year for the Rams in the first preseason game. Kind of chaotic, kind of over his skis. First game with the Rams, first preseason game with the Rams. This year, much calmer. Milton, very similar dynamic, right? I think he'll calm down with more repetitions. He's been doing well in camp. I expect him. Hope he'll play better the rest of the preseason, his opportunities. There was a Will Greer sighting, and he had a touchdown drive. So, again, Will Greer is just a preseason hero. Interesting quarterback number 2 battle potentially going on. I don't think so yet, but definitely something to keep an eye on. In terms of rushing, Malik Davis comes off the bench, comes off the couch, and has 63 rushing yards. I want to highlight this because it's important to understand why the preseason gets so wacky. So Malik Davis is an NFL running back, right? He's obviously carried the football in an actual real NFL game, right? A lot of these guys haven't, and a lot of these guys won't be playing in real NFL games. That's just a fact. That's certainly this point in the preseason, certainly in the first game of the preseason, like we saw Malik Davis playing in. So you get this weird mismatch of talent. You've got, a six-string defensive tackle going against a seventh-round offensive guard, and they're trying to tackle a guy who's actually scored touchdowns in the National Football League. You get this weird kind of mismatch here, mismatch of alignment of talent, as you can get some wacky performances, some wacky statistics. But again, I think Malik Davis coming off the couch showed what you would expect from a guy who's actually an NFL running back. Very impressive by him. Could be a good depth piece. You talk about a guy if injuries happen to call up, definitely a guy's number to keep. I think he'd be a great fit for Dallas if and when injuries happen at the running back position. Like, to be totally honest, they already have. All right, talking about Phil Mafah, 10 carries, 36 yards. He did exactly what I wanted him to do. I think a lot of people wanted to see, could he run hard? Could he be physical? And that's what we saw. Again, there was nothing, in terms of exhilarating. There wasn't anything like he is special. There was just good, solid, hard running. That's what people expect from Mafah. Want to see him continue to do that going forward. I would have almost hoped for a little more touches, but 10 carries is actually a pretty healthy amount. I think he had a pretty solid day, kind of showcased what we expected there. He was a very positive spot for this Cowboys offense. Deuce Vaughn, again, at a certain point, you have to look at him and say, how good is he? How productive is he? He really didn't do anything special yet again. Like, this is a guy is he going to take a roster spot from a guy like Phil Mafah? What does Deuce Vaughn bring to the table? I think it's a real question we have to ask. Nothing against him, just something we have to start talking about in the context of who you're actually going to have on this active roster. All right, moving on to the defensive numbers there. I'll pull up the chart. These two are both courtesy of ESPN.com. I just got the screenshots, if anyone's wondering. This is where it was very interesting. So one of the big things coming into this preseason game was Zion Childress out of Kentucky, a guy who I've admitted I was late on. I was like, who is this guy? He's a camp body. And then he starts lighting up training camp. He's getting more opportunities, getting more reps. Schottenheimer's talking about him, all this stuff. Like, who the heck is Zion Childress? And coming into this preseason game, I was saying it. Others were too. All right, let's see what happens against live competition. He leads the team in tackles, has a beautiful tackle for loss on probably defensive play of the day for Dallas, well, except for the interception. Certainly defensive play of the day in the running game, blowing up a jet sweep that the Rams famously use all the time for a 4 or 5 yard loss, right? Another thing about that real quick before I get more onto Childress here, when you have a sort of offensive and defensive scheme and strategy been using for so many years like the Rams have, preseason is usually, even though you're playing a lot of backups, can be a little cleaner because you've been running the same offense, you have the same culture, same environment for so many years that even though you've got, your backups and some practice squad and maybe some non-active roster guys running the plays, it's still everything everyone's always been running on the roster, or at least from a coaching staff, from a culture perspective, for so many years. It's the install's baked in. You're a lot calmer about it. You're a lot more methodical about it. I think that's what we saw yesterday, at times with the Rams that we didn't see with Dallas. Again, that's what happens. New coach versus coach that's been there a while, right? That's part of the process. But when you look at Childress here, just a really overall outstanding game. I want to break into his film, of course, just looking at it from a broadcast perspective and from what he did in terms of the stat sheet. Made a lot of plays, a tackle for loss, highlight of the game. Again, as advertised, we'll have to see how he looked grade perspective, but I think he did pretty well. Another guy that jumped off the list here for me was Shamar James. 5 tackles, should have had an interception, almost laid out, bounced off his hands. It was a crazy play. Just shows the kind of day it was for the Cowboys defense, especially these backups. Shamar James makes a really athletic play, just bounces off his fingertips, this close to an interception, goes right into the stomach of a Rams receiver. It's just one of those things. Hey, listen, it's not your day, but Shamar James, very athletic, very good in the run game. Can't wait to get into his film when the All-22 is released. I wanted to see Shamar James as much as anybody. I'm really high on him. You talk about a good linebacker as part of this depth, a good future young linebacker. I like what I'm seeing. He had a really good day. Someone else who had a really good day was Maris Leofau. He only played a half, but when he was playing, he was clearly the best player on the defense and maybe the best player on the field when the Rams offense was on the field, their second/third string offense against the second/third string defense for Dallas. Leofau looked the part, continues to look like, a real key guy going forward. One of the things I look for in the preseason is guys that don't belong, if that makes sense, guys that are playing with second or third string guys, and you're like, yeah, he looks better. He looks like a head above. He's playing 400 level football. The other guys are playing 100 level football. He's diagnosing plays. If someone misses a tackle, he's there to clean it up. That was Leofau. Again, good solid half for him. Really excited to see his performance there. In terms of downsides for the defense, Andrew Booth at the cornerback position just isn't an NFL corner, right? He just had a terrible day. He gave up a big completion on fourth down. It was actually pretty good coverage. It was a beautiful throw and catch, but overall, he gave up a lot of completions. He got beat a couple times. He is not an NFL corner. And I think one of the things Dallas came into this game, we'll get into some of the guys they sat and didn't play, basically all their starters. In fact, 100% of all their starters, but they didn't play Kyer Elam, which a lot of people are like, well, maybe you want to give him some more playing time, some live action. I think they didn't want to play Elam for the same reason they didn't want to play Deron Bland, is that, listen, these two guys are penciled in as starters right now. We need to figure out these other corners. Maybe it's Childress. Maybe Childress has to be the nickel and just live with that. Maybe it's Izzy, does some versatile things for him. Maybe that's who he ends up becoming. I don't know. But right now, I look at Andrew Booth and I'm like, no, sir. And I look at Hall and I look at Pride and I'm like, yeah, that's not good. And I think the one takeaway, we've seen this during camp and we've seen this in the first preseason game now, is because of injuries at corner, because of Trayvon Diggs, Savon Revel, Kalen Carson, right? Guys like Booth, guys like Pride, guys like Hall, certainly Booth. Booth can't play. If Booth plays this they're going to give up 35, 40 a game, right? They just can't unless their pass rush just takes over, right? That's just the reality. If Booth plays significant snaps, they won't stop anybody. That's just a fact. So you'll have to look at Hall and you look at Pride. I think Booth had a bad game. He's had a bad camp. I don't see how he makes this team. Maybe because he just knows the plays and knows the situation. He's a good practice squad, like emergency corner. He can line up and actually, run the right defense. He doesn't do dumb mental mistakes like we saw Amani Obiarie last year. He gives up the long bomb and a mismatch to Carolina. Obviously touches the punt against Cincinnati. Maybe he doesn't do those disaster plays, but Booth, not a good corner. Again, I'm not rooting against him. I just think that's what we saw. Pride, Hall, I don't like what I saw from them either. I don't know if they were apps. They were not as bad as Booth, but they weren't exactly good either. I think depth at corner is the biggest issue on the team because they were clearly outclassed. The backup Cowboys corners, the third-string Cowboys corners against the Rams' third-string receivers. The problem is a lot of these third-string Cowboys corners are going to someone's going to end up actually playing against the Philadelphia Eagles and some of their early opponents, right? Real problem for the Cowboys, something they're going to have to evaluate. All right, moving on to next little article here. Talking about Trayshawn Holden. This is sort of the big headline here that I got from the game and really coming after the game. This is from Joseph Hoyt, who's a good reporter. He said, Cowboys head coach Schottenheimer said that the depth chart will change after this preseason game. One example, he said wide receiver Trayshawn Holden will be moving up. He said he's getting noticed with consistent play. This is the takeaway for preseason, and every team does this, and this is really important. Coaches are using preseason to evaluate certain players that they're like, he's doing good in training camp. Let's put him in a live game and see how he does. And Holden did a lot of good things, made big plays, for example. He's a guy moving up the depth chart. I think he's a guy that has a chance to really make this team, really even make the final 53. I think he's a chance to be one of the bigger steals for the Dallas Cowboys. Diane Childress has that by a large part this season. I think he's one of these guys moving up the depth chart as well for Dallas, especially for the early part of the season as they wait to get healthier at corner. But the reality is you look at a guy like Holden and you put him in certain situations over the course of the preseason, certainly the first game, and see how they do. I remember back in 2004, the preseason, this is going to really date a few people here, the Cowboys had a fullback named Darian Barnes. And at one point in the game, they gave the football as a running back to Darian Barnes 3 times in 4 plays or something like that. It was so hilarious because Darian Barnes, the guy who was 2 carries in his entire career. Why are you giving the ball 3 times and basically in a row? And the answer was pretty clear. The Cowboys coaching staff at the time, smart guys like Sean Payton, for example, wanted to evaluate him. Wanted to say, hey, let's give him a few touches. Let's see how he does. Let's see if it's something we want to consider during the regular season. That's a lot of what's going on here. They look at certain players in certain situations and say, hey, how did he do? Okay, he didn't do good. Okay, he can't make the team. Or, hey, let's put him in this spot. Oh, wow, he did well. Let's move him up and see how he reacts. That's what we're seeing with Trayshawn Holden. Again, a guy who a lot of people were high on. I've been waiting to see more of him. We saw the flashes. I'm not surprised he's moving up the depth chart. I think he's got a chance to replace people like Brooks, like Flournoy, to be that wide receiver, that back end of the wide receiver room. I think he's a lot better than people think. I'm excited to see how he develops. Again, another guy I was late on, right? I was talking about guys I think good undrafted free agents like Clark, like Barron, but guys like Childress and now Holden are starting to steal the show, impressing everyone. Nice performance from him. Credit to him. Wanted to see him continue to get it going. Anytime you're moving up the depth chart, especially preseason when the rubber meets the road as we get deeper into camp, that's a good sign. All right, next report is just a list of the guys who didn't play, and this is not exhaustive, by the way. I'm just highlighting this to basically calm down people that are freaking out a little bit. So this is per Todd Archer. Guys that aren't playing: Dak Prescott, Devontae Turpin, Javonte Williams, Hunter Lipke, Terrence Steele, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker. Obviously, injured guys like Guyton, like Jaden Blue, aren't playing either. Jake Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, John Stevens. So basically, you look at this and say, okay, the starting offense isn't playing, right? You know, your Jalen Tolbert, your wide receiver 3-4 combination, Tolbert and Mingo. Those guys were the only guys that were playing for the offense, and we're being totally honest, that actually played in yesterday's preseason game, that are going to get any sort of significant reps during the regular season, with the exception of Nate Thomas at the swing tackle, right? But so outside of any injuries, like we've already seen with Guyton, for example, no one we saw yesterday offensively will play a meaningful snap for Dallas outside of Tolbert and Mingo. One of those guys will. One of them will have to beat out unless there's a young guy like Holden emerging, right? There's no veteran guy. So let's calm down a little bit about some concerns. What we saw was second, third string Cowboys offense having issues. Now, Nate Thomas, again, backup, he's getting some playing time. Again, he's a backup. You expect him to have some issues. We'll see how he did on film. I thought he did okay. I don't think it was spectacular, but I thought he did fine. But I think overall what we saw from Dallas offensively, obviously not the real team. And of course, defensively, that was the case as well. Did we see Sanborn? Did we see Murray? Did we see Osa Odigizua? Also did not see Micah Parsons, of course. We saw Ezra Raku did some good things. I thought he got some good pocket pressure, got a quarterback hit. Want to break down his film as well. We didn't see Tyler Booker, another rookie I wanted to see, but you look at this Cowboys defense, of course, didn't see Deron Bland. Diggs is still hurt, right? They're starting safeties. There were no starters. There were no significant players. Kyer Elam was sat. Like the only guy on defense, the only two guys, to be totally honest, I'll say three, that we saw that I think will have a chance to play significantly from what we saw yesterday was Leofau. It was Ezra Raku, and none of these guys I think are going to start. I think they're just going to play significantly. It's Leofau, Ezra Raku, and Childress. And Childress may start, but again, as a backup because of the injuries. That's all we saw from Dallas defensively. Again, through the course of the entire game, and this was the same with both sides, we didn't see any of who the Cowboys really are. So if they had won by 10 or lost by 10, won by 30, lost by 30, take it with a grain of salt. You did not see what the Cowboys are going to look like this upcoming season. All right, that's all the news from the preseason game. Give me your thoughts in the comment section below, what your takeaways are. I know there's a lot of negativity, a lot of concern coming out of this from the Cowboys' perspective about, hey, like, did not look good. I understand falling behind 14-0 in the first quarter, 2 3-and-outs, 1 yard of offense. The Rams go down the field. Yeah, I get there's some concerns and red flags there, and there are some issues, right? But let's not overreact to one preseason game, guys. You should never overreact to one regular season game, right? That's, one game is significant, of course, but one regular season game does not make or miss a season. We saw Dallas dominate Cleveland in Cleveland. When Cleveland was a playoff team in 2023, they went to Cleveland week 1 in 2024 and dominated them. And then how that season turned out, how last year turned out, right? The Patriots in 2003 famously lost 31-0 to Buffalo week 1. They ended up winning the Super Bowl, right? So again, we can't overreact week to week, certainly not in the preseason. Individual performances, a lot of bad. Let's be totally honest, a lot of bad, but there was some good. And when you're not playing a lot of your starters, you're just looking for those 1 or 2 or 3 good instances. I think Childress, I think James, I think Leofau really did some good things in terms of guys stepping up, Holden earning more playing time. Want to look at Nate Thomas and Ezra Raku more in detail to see how they did. Want to look at Troy Pride and want to look at Hall to see if they were at least competent. I don't think Booth was at all, but I think from an overall perspective, more bad than good across the board. Joe Milton missed some guys. I mean, at one point it was 14-6, and that deep route that he missed, it was, those at 20 yards over his head, right? If he hits him in stride or even hits him okay, the Cowboys go down and score points, maybe score a touchdown, and then you feel differently about the flow of the game, right? So again, don't obsess over the score and performance. A lot of people are. Don't yet. We'll see what happens after the first few games of the season. And again, new era, new coaching staff. Let's be totally honest, guys. It's going to be slow. It's going to be slow going in the regular season, especially when you factor in the injuries. Just temper yourself. It's a long season, long slog. Just hang in there. All right, let's get to the comments from yesterday's video. There's a lot of interesting stuff to get into here. I'm going to try and cover as much as I can. I know this was before the actual game, but I want to highlight some pretty funny ones. Cowboys Chad 5x778 posted, fun fact, Phil Malfa is on a first-name basis with a flute player from Jethro Tull. I do not know if that was a joke or a pun or if that's actually factual, but if it is, that's pretty awesome. So that's a good fun fact for the day. I think that's pretty cool. There's a lot of people, when I brought up comparing the Cowboys with Washington and New York, Washington's made an NFC Championship game, New York's won a Super Bowl over the past 15 seasons. Pretty much everyone that commented said, yeah, I'd rather be Dallas because Dallas won 40 more games. And I think that's just the point I made, and I think a lot of people agree with that. Would you rather have one magical season or 3 to 4 more wins per year on average, right? And certainly better than Washington. There was some debate over the Super Bowl championship. It's just something to keep in mind. Dan DeTola, again, hit it right on the nail. You kind of saw this coming. I want to see the wide receivers fight it out in preseason, talking about who he wants to see, what position groups. Lamb, Pickens, and Turpin are locks. Who is going to be numbers 4, 5, and 6? Sounds like Schottenheimer agreed with you, right? And that's why Holden, was moving up the depth chart. I think he's looking at 4, 5, and 6. Didn't really see anything good or bad or indifferent from Mingo. I think Holden moving up the depth chart, definitely something to keep an eye on. Let's see here. This is from Steven Vanover. Posted this, good commenter. He always puts good stuff out there. He said, historical context, preseason records are not kept from the Tom Landry era, but my dad and I often had conversations about Landry's penchant for losing all of them, as he famously noted preseason games were about evaluating individual players while never showing anything that would be used in the regular season. Next time, put a fedora hat on your channel when you channel your inner Landry, you would look and sound the part. Well played. Yeah, I don't think I can pull off the fedora, right? I think that's a classic look for the great Tom Landry, of course, that I certainly can't. But, again, that's not my I didn't have special insight there. I mean, I think we all can agree you don't show your hand in preseason, evaluate individual players, right? So I agree with you 100% there, Steven. I think that's the right approach to make. The Patriots, I think, under Belichick for years when they were winning Super Bowls, in the early 2000s during that little run they had there before the dynasty really extended, they would go like 0-4 in the preseason. They were terrible in the preseason, and obviously they'd win a lot of games. Again, it's about evaluating individual players. I think we can all agree on that. This is one interesting comment that draw a lot of feedback. This is from Marks, the idol of the idol, 5591. I trade the past 15 years with Washington and New York if it meant an ownership change. I want the franchise completely ripped from the Jones family. Look what happened to Washington in a short time after the league got rid of Dan Snyder. We need that happen to Jerry and Steven in Dallas, or we'll never see the Cowboys win another ring. Well, I mean, it's one of those things. Washington didn't win a Super Bowl last year. They're not even the favorites to win this year. They're not even the favorites to go out of the NFC. They're not even the favorites to win their division, right? They're a fun, exciting team last year that had a great record in one-score games. They pulled out a lot of miracles. I mean, even the last game of the regular season against Dallas took a last-second score. They needed the Hail Mary against Chicago, I believe. They had a close win against Philly, the close win in overtime against Atlanta, close win against Tampa Bay. They lucked out a little bit against Detroit. Detroit was so devastated by injuries, got some turnover bounces, just a shocking win. And when they actually rubber met the road and they played Philadelphia, that Dan Quinn defense, that Jane Daniels offense. And Daniels is a really good player, don't get me wrong. I think he's got a bright future. He had a magical rookie season. They got smacked 55-23, lost by 32. They got humiliated, right? So again, people looking at Washington said, well, they made it to the NFC Championship game. If Dallas made it to the NFC Championship game last year, 2023, 22, whatever, and gave up 55 points, like imagine if 2023 happened and that loss to Green Bay occurred, but happened in the NFC Championship game, and they actually gave up another touchdown and they scored fewer points. Would you be any happier? Would you be saying Jerry Jones should keep the franchise? No, of course not, because that's just the way it works. It's always a sliding scale. The reality is Washington's doing some good things, and look, they're trending in their best direction in a long time, but that's more Jaden Daniels. They drafted Jaden Daniels. They got good at quarterback. We'll see what happens this season. Dan Quinn's a good turnaround artist. We all know that. We saw that in Dallas. Let's not overreact. Remember, Dan Snyder had some very, very serious, I want to say financially, he was cutting corners and costs and not spending money. Right? There was a lot of issues with that Snyder organization that don't exist in Jerry Jones, the most powerful owner in professional sports. Let's not overreact. I saw a lot of comments pushing back on this guy's comment, and I would agree with that. So this is interesting. This is courtesy of Tabletop 9820. He said, you've been misinformed. Player agents only get 3%, not 10%. Player agents can negotiate higher than 3% only for commercial, advertisement, shoe deals, etc. Okay, thank you for the fact check. I did not know that. So I've been saying 10% off the top. I guess it's only 3%, and they get 10% of other deals. I think the point's still valid, though, is that it's still millions of dollars potentially right off the top, and maybe using a great lawyer and a great CPA and maybe a talent rep for those shoe deals and things like that separately than a collective agent. I think that almost would be a better approach for players. So I stand by my original statement and my point, but thank you for the fact check for correcting me on that. Joe Jocko Loans posted, Law 101 says a verbal agreement is valid. I don't know if the law has changed since I was in college way back, though. Joe Cool One, thank you very much. for correcting. He actually put that in the comment. Thank you for putting that pronunciation in there. Yeah, I think one of the things, and I don't know the law. I don't pretend to know the law. I'm obviously not a lawyer. Didn't go to law school, anything like that. But I feel like just from a personal perspective between Parsons and Jerry Jones, again, I wasn't in the room, but if they agreed to something and shook hands on it, eye to eye, man to man, and then if that gets changed later because of the agent, I can see why Jones would be unsettled and upset. But I can also see both sides of it too, because Jones did kind of strong arm him into it with that situation. Not kind of, he did. So I understand the concerns there. It's interesting that the verbal agreement is valid. I did not know that. So if that is the case, that kind of throws a big wrench, and it makes Jerry Jones's case a little stronger. It says, if we agreed, now there's no recording of it, of anything, of course, but if they did actually agree verbally and shake hands and that was valid, then I can see why Jerry Jones is upset, because that's basically, hey man, we signed the contract based on what you said there. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I'm kind of relying on you here. It sounds like they basically agreed in terms, and then Micah Parsons is sort of reneging after the fact. So again, I think this is something to keep in mind here in terms of how this all shakes out. I think it's going to be settled before it's all said and done. I think we've seen this play out before. Micah Parsons is going to get paid. Cowboys need to pay him. He needs to play for Dallas. We obviously know the defense has issues. We'll see how it all shakes out. But thank you again for the law information there. Again, I don't know the law, and thank you for the fact checks. Once again, it really helps me get the information right. That's what I like from the comment section, by the way. Get a lot of great fact checks, a lot of great information, a lot of good conversation, a lot of good dialogue from you guys. I like learning from you. Hope you learn from me, and I want to make sure we go through the process and go through this daily Cowboys show, just putting out good information. That's why I try and cite good reporters, good boots on the ground guys. I try and avoid the hyperactive social media guys that just basically put out random stuff, and they over amplify some random news reporting that they heard from some rumor on some unverified social media source or whatever it may be, right? I try and focus on good sourcing, good comments, and good information. So if I say anything that's incorrect, please correct me, and I will call you out specifically and give you a kudos for correcting me. I want to be factually accurate. That's the most important thing to me personally on this show. But when it comes to the Cowboys, obviously a lot of things to work on. We'll see how the depth chart shakes out, of course, going forward. I'm going to have a lot of film reviews coming this week, just specifically Ezra Raku, probably Phil Maffa, definitely Samar James, definitely a lot of other guys. Jay Toya, nose guard, he's going to be in the mix as well. There's going to be a lot of Cowboys I'm going to be looking into, so make sure you stay tuned to that. But until next time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.